Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Simplifying the Migration Equation. This is Tom McGleary from JustSystems, and I'll be your everything today. I'm handling the webinar all by myself for the very first time, and I don't know how to run some of these consoles, so we're going to find out. We're going to sort of hope that everything works, but I think so far everything seems to be in order. So we're recording the webinar today, and that recording will be available after the webinar is over, and we'll send that out to everybody on the mailing list. So even if you have to drop off, you'll be able to pick up that webinar recording later. If you have any questions, the fact that I'm here by myself today means that I will not probably be able to monitor the chat or the Q&A during the session. But after I'm finished with my slides, I will be looking at the, hopefully if we have some extra time, I'll be looking at the chat and QA boxes, and we'll answer as many questions at that point as I can. If you have logistical difficulties, such as the audio not working, I'm afraid that I probably won't be able to help you with that during the session. So you may, as a last resort, just need to wait until you get the recording after the webinar. Okay, so with that said, I think let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to start off by telling a little story about some things that happened to me when I was back in university. I was both a math and computer science major, and I did a lot of math nerding when I was in college. And any of you who have done math know that proving mathematical theorems is basically what mathematicians do, and it's not necessarily easy, but the more you know, the easier it can be. There are lots of things that you can learn that can help you to prove whatever problem you happen to be currently working on. So previously proven theorems, if you remember ones that exist, proof patterns, in other words, standard sort of way of writing proofs and techniques, all these kinds of things, the more you know, the more it can help you to more effectively solve the problem or prove the theorem that you're working on. So the skill for a mathematician is simply to know more stuff. The more these kinds of things you know, the more likely you are to be able to prove the thing that you're working on. In other words, as one of the professors used to say back then, you want to have a bigger bag of tricks, and that's why we would learn as much, learn as many theorems and proof techniques as we could, because the more you know, the more likely you're going to need to be able to solve your current problem. So the reason I'm telling you the story is that my intention at the presentation today is to add to your bag of XMetaL tricks, so that in solving this particular problem that people often face with XMetaL, you'll be able to possibly be more efficient and solve the problems more quickly. So that we're talking about today is the problem of migrating content, and I'm sure that many of you who work with XMetaL and XML have faced this problem. It's very labor intensive, and many of you probably know that if you have too much content, you may need to hire it out. There are companies whose entire business is helping people to migrate content from forms such as Microsoft Word and unstructured frame to XML data types. And I'm going to be doing my examples mostly in DITA today, but this applies to any XML structures that you're working with. There's still a cost involved in converting content from unstructured into structured data. If you have a small enough problem, you may be able to manage the problem in-house by hiring staff, or by even doing it with the staff that you have. And what I want to get at today is teaching you some things that can make you more efficient with XMetaL, and probably lower that bar and give you the opportunity to have your people work more efficiently and be able to do some of the content migration in XMetaL. So most of the tips and tricks I'm going to show you today are, to me, I think of them as basically standard XMetaL stuff. They're just XMetaL power user stuff, but I'm hoping that some of them will be new to you, and you'll be able to see ways that you can leverage these to make things work more efficiently. Probably not only with migrating content, but even in your day-to-day work, you may find some of these tips to be helpful. I do make some assumptions about sort of who you are before we get started. The first assumption is that you have to understand or I guess the main assumption is that you understand your target schema. As I said, I'll be using DITA today, but this is going to apply to any XML document type that you're working with, I assume that you know how things are supposed to fit into your target schema. What content in your unstructured content maps into what elements in your target schema. In other words, if I give you some a page or two of unstructured content, you'd be able to easily visualize the elements that are going to result when that content has been finally converted into the XML. We're only going to be looking at simple examples today, paragraphs, lists, and not too much more than that. You certainly know how to recognize those kinds of structures in unstructured content, and so hopefully you can also visualize what the actual XML markup that you're aiming for is going to look at. That's half the battle, is knowing what you're aiming for, because that sort of allows you to pick which items from your bag of tricks are going to allow you to get from where you are to where you want to go. So to start with, the first part of the problem is to get some content to XMetal. So of course you know you can't open anything except XML files with XMetal. So the typical way to do this, and we also don't have any built-in import functions per se. So the typical way to get content into XMetal is simply to open the document in something else, whatever is appropriate for it, copy some stuff, and paste it into XMetal. Any of you who have done this know that what you get can vary considerably, and it's often on the lower end of the scale. The three sort of most common options or likely possibilities are that you might get some text that's just entirely smushed into one single element. You might get a whole bunch of individual lines pasted in as one paragraph per line, or if you're in just the right situation, you might get some better structure. Some examples of that are if you copy a table from Excel and paste it into DITA, XMetal will usually manage to make a table out of that. Similarly, if you copy some textual type content from Microsoft Word, XMetal can usually manage to turn the paragraphs into paragraphs and the lists into something that looks kind of like a list but has some problems that we'll look at later. Let me show you some examples by getting started with the things I want to do here. So I'm going to so here's XML. I don't have any files open right now, and I'm going to start with a plain text example, which is, you don't want to see that one. You want to see this one. So I've got some text that I saved from the Gutenberg project and you're seeing my desktop. Okay, I can fix that. Bear with me just 1 second. Okay. Okay, we're going to back up to what you've missed. Okay, so I started by showing you XMetal. There it is, empty, nothing in my hands, and now I'm going to switch to my web browser and show you that I've got some text that I copied and pasted from the Gutenberg project, just Alice in Wonderland, and I'm going to copy some of that text, which I've got in my web browser here. And so there's Control-C for copy, back to XMetal, and I'm going to open a new DITA document, and I'm just going to do a paste. And as you see, this is the worst case. All of that text got smushed into the title element. There's my tags on, so you can see that all that text is title. I have that in my slides as I get to my slides. Why can't I get slides? I can't get my own slides. That's interesting. Okay, how do I get back to my slides? So, as you can see, this happens when you're thrown into doing this for the first time unexpectedly. Well, let's press on with the demo, and I'll figure out how to get back to the slides later. So the second possibility, or the second option, is that I have this same text also open in a text editor. So here is Notepad++, and here's that same text. And there's just something different about the new lines in my text editor versus the new lines in the web browser, so that when I copy this from Notepad++ and switch back to XMetal, and I'm going to close that file on a new one, and paste again. And yet in this case, XMetal was able to interpret those new lines and insert everything as a big long sequence of paragraphs. That's a little better. We can work with that a little bit more easily in some ways that I'm going to show you coming up next. Before I do that, I'm just going to show you one more case, which is I have this file as a Word document. That's not it. That's it. I can't open this folder. Here it is. Same text in a simply formatted Word document. And if I copy it from Word and go back to XMetal and open yet another new file and do a paste, you can see in this case XMetal manages to do something a little bit better with it. That's because XMetal has some ability to do some translation of Microsoft Word content, and so we get a little bit lucky there in that the paragraphs are all coming in a single paragraph. The title was actually recognized as a title. Although this stuff is wrapped up in a section, which may or may not be what I actually wanted with this file, but that's cleanup that we could also do later as well. Okay, so I'll close that file because I want to show you some tips and tricks for working with this type of content. Now, I really would like to get back to my slides, but I don't see it. Let me go back to, maybe I need to pause my sharing. Let me go back to... Sorry guys, this is to this. There we go. I apologize for this. We've just done this example, pasting the same content to XMetal from 3 different sources, and I just put some screenshots in the slides to show what that might look like. That's the same thing that we just did. But let's get on to doing some cleanup. So the first sample that I want to show you is a really handy shortcut in XMetal called joining elements. And right there on the menus, but you might overlook it because it's not something you use in your daily work. There's a shortcut key, and I'm going to be heavy on shortcut keys. I know you don't get to see those the way you're working there, but I'll tell you whenever or the way you're watching me there, but I'll tell you whenever I'm using them. Shift-J is simply going to join 2 elements of the same type together. If you have 2 paragraphs in a row, XMetal is going to turn them into 1 paragraph. So the way you do this is you place your cursor inside the second of those 2 elements, and I want to go into some precise detail about what I mean by in. So what I mean by in this case is that your cursor or selection needs to be in such a position that the parent of your cursor or selection is the element that you're talking about. So in other words, if you're trying to join 2 paragraphs, you need to have the parent of your selection be one of those paragraphs. What I mean by that, can you see, did you get to see XMetal? No, I have to swap back and forth each time. So if I switch back to XMetal now, and it's going to make me do all kinds of weird swapping every time. So if I switch back to XMetal now and position myself here, you can see that my cursor is inside of a paragraph. Now it's obvious in this case because there's nothing else inside the paragraph. But suppose this word were a bolded word. Now the cursor is no longer in the paragraph in the sense that I'm talking about here, because the cursor is actually inside the B. It's not inside the paragraph. So I want the immediate parent of my cursor or my selection to be the paragraph. Let me get that B, and now again the parent is the paragraph. There's an easy way to verify where you are in XMetal if it's not evident from where you are, from where your blinking cursor is located. And the way to tell that is to look down at the mini context, which is this little breadcrumb trail down here at the bottom of XMetal. Right now, the last thing in the trail is P, which means that that's my closest parent of where my cursor is. So that, in this case, means I'm in the right place. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-A, and that joins these 2 paragraphs together. And you can see that's a very quick way for me to merge this whole paragraph back into one single paragraph. I'm just going to hit 3 more times, boom, 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 and I've got a single paragraph again. Merging these paragraphs again, 4 presses of Control-Shift-J, boom, 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 boom. So you can see that this is pretty efficient, or as efficient as you can be for something that's really a labor-intensive manual sort of operation. So there you go. that's item number 1. And back to slides. This is going to get a little bit cumbersome. That's example number 1. Join, by the way, is not useful only for paragraphs. You can use it with any two elements whose contents can be, meaning the inner contents of the element can be concatenated together and then pushed into the contents of the first element. So if you have two consecutive list items, you can merge them into one list item if the contents of those list items are mergeable. In some GTDs, that might not be the case. For example, if your list item requires a single sub-element as a child, then it's probably not going to be the case that you're able to merge two consecutive list items, because both those list items are going to have that child, and merging them together would mean two of the children. That would no longer be a valid list item in that imaginary DTD. So list items in the usual case will work, though. More like structures such as sections, which I think I can show you an example of later, and some unusual cases or unexpected cases, such as in DITA, you can actually merge notes with paragraphs, because it just so happens that those two elements have exactly the same content model, or essentially the same content model. And so anything that you're going to have in a note can be concatenated with anything that you have in a paragraph. Those two, and then that whole concatenated stuff smushed inside whichever note or paragraph was the first of those two items. We'll show you some of these examples later, although I don't have a note and paragraph example lined up. The next tip is surrounding elements. So to move onward with our example, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the paragraph that we've created inside our document and now wrap those paragraphs inside of a section. And the way we do that with is simply inserting an element in XMetaL. This is so easy that I probably don't need. This is one that I wouldn't think that I need to show any of you who ever have ever worked with XMetaL before, but for someone who's completely new, it may be helpful. So let's go back to XMetaL. Boy, this is old. And so what I want to do is I want to select these three paragraphs. Actually, I'll select the chapter title as well, because I'm going to use that in a bit. So I'm going to select these three paragraphs. And what I want to do is now insert a section element that wraps those three paragraphs. But before I do that, I want to tell you about some other tips. And this is moving on my slides, but I'm just going to talk about them. Notice how quickly, I don't know if you could tell over the WebEx, how quickly I was able to select those three paragraphs. I just dragged across from the first paragraph to the last paragraph haphazardly. XMetaL was able to select those four paragraphs very quickly, and that's because of sort of an internal rule that XMetaL has, which is that it always makes your selection, your highlight, be a well-formed fragment of XML. So no way, for example, to make a selection that starts here in the middle of one paragraph and ends here in the middle of the other. As soon as you move your mouse beyond the end of the tag boundary, XMetaL selects the entire element, and then as soon as you move anywhere into the next element, you get the whole element. So that means that you can actually select sequences of elements really, really quickly in XMetaL just by carelessly setting the mouse down anywhere in the beginning in the middle of one of them and dragging them anywhere into the middle of the other. So that's a fast way to select things in XMetaL that you may or may not be aware of. And what I mean by fast is I just mean that you can be more careless with the mouse. You don't have to be as precisely position the mouse as you might have to do in some other situations. You don't have to carefully position the mouse right there at the front of the tag and then you drag to some careful position at the end. That's a slow operation, having to precisely position the mouse cursor. So it's nice to be able to avoid that when you can. Another fast way to select things in XMetaL is to use keyboard shortcuts. So with my mouse here, or with my cursor here anywhere in the middle of this paragraph, if I use the arrow key along with the shift to press the down arrow, it actually moves me right down to the next line. With the shift key held down means select to that next thing, but that's going to follow the same rules as it does with the mouse, which is that you're going to get those paragraphs. So from here, with my cursor in the first paragraph, with three down arrows, boom, 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 I get that sequence of paragraphs, and that's pretty fast as well. And if you're a real keyboard junkie, and if you happen to have your mouse in the right, your cursor in the right place, that's probably even faster than the mouse. And it's useful sometimes, although not in this particular case, is the expand your selection command, which is, it's called Select Element on the menus in XMetal. Control-Shift-T is the shortcut, and that shortcut is really useful to remember. It basically means take whatever you have selected right now, whether it's a point or a selection, and expand that to include the next container. So the next Control-Shift-T gets me a paragraph, and the next Control-Shift-T is actually, in this case, going to get me the whole con body, which is more than I want, but I'll do it to show you what happens. Okay, so back to the purpose of the demo, which is to wrap these guys in a section. So I select the 4 paragraphs, and I hit Control-I, which simply opens the element list. And what I would add a section here, but you'll notice that there's no section on the element list. And those of you who are very familiar with DITA will know the reason for that. I've been careless here, and I forgot to be aware of the rules of my DTD. DITA has a rule that you can only insert a section if it so happens that there are no individual paragraphs following that section. So in other words, once you have a section in your DITA concept, you can't have any individual paragraphs outside that section following that section. The reason I don't see a section on my element list is because sections are not allowed to go over the selection that I have highlighted. So I fix that up. I'm going to delete this dummy paragraph here. I'm going to make my selection again. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I again, and now I do see section on my list. And so I'll just type S to get to that and enter to select it, and I've got a section in my topic. Fast. Now let's go back to XMetal, and I'm going to try a different approach here. Good. Nope, I didn't want XMetal. Well, okay, that would have worked, except I wanted to go to my slides. Okay. So I talked about fast selections. That was part of my demo. Now the next thing I'd like to do is to show you changing an element. So the example that I'd like to show you now is I included that title in my section, and I'd like to move on. I'd like to now take that title, which is currently formatted as a paragraph, and change that into an actual title. That's an easy operation in XMetal to change an element. So back to Metal. Having selected, so in order to change an element, you need to place your cursor in the element you want to change, and this is the same kind of in as before. It's not going to work if you select this paragraph, because your parent is no longer that paragraph. You need to be inside the paragraph, although it doesn't matter whether you have some text selected or not, but the important thing is to be inside the paragraph, and now hit the change element command, which is going to bring up the same element list, but in a different mode. If you know about the modes of the element list, it has a change mode and an insert mode. Insert mode is kind of the most common usage of this, but change mode is going to show you all the elements that this particular element can be changed into, and the one I want is title, and so I like that, and I've got a title in my section. That's all there is to it. So that's the next tip, is using the change mode of your of XMetal to change elements into alternative other elements. So it may be, though, in this example, that this is not where we want the title. Maybe we don't want a section at all. Maybe we don't want a title at all. Maybe we want this whole DITA topic to be this chapter. And so we want the title to be up at the main title of the topic, and we want the section possibly to even be gone. So there are several different ways we can do this, and this involves getting onto some more of my shortcut keys. So the first one I'm going to try is Control-Shift-T first of all. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take the title that I have down here, and I'm going to cut it out of my section, and I'm going to paste it into the title on the top. And this is going to work because it's the same element. And so the quick way to do that is select element with Control-Shift-T, and that's what I do right there. And I'm going to do a cut, which is just, of course, Control-X. And I go up here to my title, but before I do the paste, I'm going to do a Control-Shift-T again, and that selects my whole title. When you're doing a copy and paste of an element in XMetal to an element of the same type, if you select the element of the same type, then XMetal should simply replace that element with what you have on the clipboard. So now I do my paste, and I've got my title up there. So that's an option. Another option, I'm going to do a few undos here to get back to where I was. option that you can do, and depending on what you're doing, this may or may not be a more efficient thing to do than what I just did. But if you select the entire contents of this element, then you can cut or copy that. I'll do a copy, then move up here and do a paste. And so the net effect is, the net effect here is the difference here is that you have a choice of whether you're keeping this this title in the element or not. Another thing that we have wanted to do is to remove the section tag. If we have the title up in the chapter, there's a remove element command, which is also on the menu here. The remove tags, which is here on the menu. It's great right now because it's not available, because I'm not allowed to remove the section tag in my current situation. So I've selected the contents of the section that I want to section tags that I want to remove. The important thing is to have your selection inside the section element, in the same sense of inside that we've been talking about. So you can put your cursor somewhere like this so that it's an insertion point but the page section, or you can select some stuff inside here, again, so that the parent of the stuff you have selected is the section. That's the important thing. But that's when you want to do remove tags. But the reason I don't get to do remove tags right now is because it's not a valid operation. And the reason it's not a valid operation is because of that title. It's not valid to have a title in my DITA content without a section there. So if I delete this title, then I'll be able to do the kind of things that I've been trying to do. So I'll select something in here so that section is my parent. I'll go to remove tags, which is now available on the list. That means also that it's available by shortcut key, and that's how I'm going to do it. So Control-Shift-D. Control-Shift-D, move the section tags. All right, I've covered a few more of my slides, so let's go back and review those. Back to this. Right, so I showed you changing an element. We changed a paragraph into a title, and I did a little bit of my talking around with this stuff. I looked at these couple of different options for where we could put the title and the ways to get to them. One thing I didn't mention at the time when I was doing that copy and paste of the title text from the one title and then pasting it inside the other title is that selecting the contents of an element like that is a slow operation, in the same way that making selections can be a slow operation, because in order to make that selection I had to do that careful positioning of my mouse at the beginning of the title but inside the title tag, and then drag it carefully to the end of the title but inside the title tag, so that I got exactly the text I want. I don't doing those kinds of operations with the mouse because it's easy to drop off the first letter of the title or the last letter of the title, and it also feels a little bit slower. I'd rather have some kind of command that sort of me automatically select the contents of that title. So I can, in fact, do that, but I can't do it with what's built into XMetaL. So there's an XMetaL command built in that lets you select the contents of an element. But there's a script API, and it allows us to lead into the kinds of things you can do with XMetaL script. What we're going to do is we're going to write a macro that lets us select the contents of it. Give it a keyboard shortcut so we can get to it really, really fast. So, of course, I'm going to write the macro right here and right now, but here it is. So this is what the macro looks like. So you can see, well, you don't need to understand all this code right now, but I want to highlight a few of the bits. The stuff I've grayed out right here is the stuff that's going to be present in any macro. You can think of that as just copy and paste macro template kind of stuff. If you understand all the XML that's going on there, that's just great, but you don't need to. But the important aspects of this particular macro are the properties that are given in the attributes at the beginning, and then the code itself, which is the last bit here. So a macro has a name, which is going to go up in a couple places inside XMetaL. We're not actually going to show you these places where the name shows up, because we're going to access our macro by shortcut key, so we don't even have to see that list of macros. There's a hide property that lets you determine whether that macro is going to show up in the list. Normally, if you're writing a user macro, of course you'd want it to show up on the list, and so you'll have that set to be false. But if you for some reason want this macro to be hidden from your users, then you can set that to be true and that'll be hidden. That's common with another type of macro that we have in XMetaL called event macros, for example. Often, they're almost always hidden from users. Macros are going to be written in some kind of scripting language, and you use the lang property to specify to XMetaL what that scripting language is. That way XMetaL knows which scripting runtime engine it needs to load in order to run this macro. And you can see that the fourth property is, of course, my keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-S is what I'm going to use for that. And then after that, you've got the code, which in this case is only one line long. There's just one line of code here because there's an API that does exactly the thing that I want to do, and so all I have to do is put that one line of code in my macro, and it's going to do what I want. Macro, it has all the text that I had on the previous page. Save it in a file with an NCR extension, put it in a folder, and by xmdir I'm referring to the XMetaL installation directory, which is of course going to vary depending on your operating system and the version of XMetaL that you have and so on, but your XMetaL installation folder is always going to have a folder in there called blah 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 /author, and a startup folder inside of that. That startup folder is the one that contains all the macros that are going to get executed when XMetaL launches. And so in order to get your macro to be available in XMetaL, you need to restart XMetaL if it's not if it's already. I need to go to XMetaL because I have already loaded my macro into XMetaL. So all I need to do is go to XMetaL and show you what it looks like. Here is XMetaL, and let me just do a little bit of undo to get to the point where I had that title in my section. So here's my title in my section, and I'm going to press Control-Shift-S. Boom, and there it is. It did what I wanted it to do. Actually, already, I still had my stuff here, so I can delete that the same way, and now paste the one that I had copied. Control-Shift-S, copies to a copy, and then Control-Shift-S, delete, and do a paste. And so that's really an unfortunate choice of dummy text there. So let's just delete that rabbit too. Okay. So that's our macro. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'm getting comments from people. Okay, let's go back to the slides. All right. So another handy tip. So suppose to split sections. This one's just kind of thrown in here. There's another common thing that you might want to do is splitting elements. So we have that section in our document right now, and let's suppose for some reason we wanted that to be two sections. There's something that you can do. There's a handy command in XMetaL to be able to do that called Control-Shift, called split an element, which is has a shortcut command of Control-Shift-P. Let me show you that one real briefly. We're short on time. I wanted to finish in 37 minutes, but it's looking like we may get closer to 45. So back to XMetaL. So you can use the split command to split any element that is splittable according to your DTD. So you can split paragraphs. Watch this, Control-P, and I've split that paragraph into 2 paragraphs. But of course, with paragraphs, you can just split them by pressing the Enter key. So who cares? But suppose you want to split this section, which we have here, into 2 sections. So if you position your cursor inside the element that you want to split, and that's that same definition of split again. So I've got my cursor now in a place where my parent is the section, and I hit Control-Shift-P, and I can split that section. So that's a really nifty command that lets you split sections. You can split lists this way. I think you can even, I haven't tried this lately, but I think you can possibly even split tables, like by splitting the T group. I'm not so sure about that because you can't probably get to the T group tag. Hold your thought on that. That might not be true, but you might be able to do it with simple tables. You probably can split simple tables. Anyway, there is splitting an element. Back to my slides. I should have written macros that let me switch back and forth between my slides and XMetaL. So I have another macro example that we can show you, and it is one specific problem that comes up regularly whenever I'm converting sort of some quick and dirty content from Word to XMetaL. To do this, I need to show you Word and show you a Word example that's different from the one we've been doing before. But this is a common thing that you see. You have a numbered list and some Word content. If you copy content and then and paste it into XMetaL. Switch. I'm going to do a new document for this one. I'm going to put content into XMetaL. Stop, you've seen this before, right? XMetaL interprets ordered lists from Word as a big long sequence of individual ordered lists. That looks ghastly if you know your DITA XML. This is terrible, but we can do some major cleanup on it, first of all, by knowing the things that we know already. So for one thing, we can join all these paragraphs. We've got individual paragraphs containing individual lists that have one item each. First of all, we can join all these paragraphs together, so at least we have one paragraph, and this is Control-Shift-J, just like we did before. So I've positioned myself inside a paragraph, and I'm hitting Control-Shift-J 15 times, and I lost track of my count. So boom, boom. Where am I? Done. Good. I did one too many. So there's my list inside of a paragraph. I don't even want that paragraph, so I'm going to do Control-Shift-D to get rid of that paragraph. Now that's gone. Now I have lists with I have 16 lists. I can merge lists with that same same join command. So here's joining the list. 15 presses of Control-Shift-J. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So one list now. So that was quick. I'm down to a single list with exactly what I want. But there's one problem left over, which is that I've got this little bit of text here at the beginning of each list item, which is ugly and nasty and now irrelevant, because Excel and, of course, my publishing system are going to automatically number that list for me. So I can tediously delete this text by, press the delete key time again. But look, that's error prone. I already made a mistake. So hit undo there to fix it. But instead, it would be better if we wrote a macro to do that, right? So I wrote a macro to do that. So here is my slides, just to take a very quick peek at that macro. It's got code. Don't try to learn that, but look right here in the middle where it says get elements by tag name. That's an XMetaL command that does in fact return a list of all the elements that have that tag. Then there's a loop, which is going to go through each one of those elements that have that tag, and it has a leading number with a period. It's going to delete that using regular expressions. That's all you need to understand about that code. So back to XMetaL now and have a peek at what that macro will do. That's quick. Yeah, there's XMetaL, and I'm just going to hit my shortcut key, which is Control-Shift-U, and it's all gone. So that was quick. It was error-free because my macro is, of course, perfect. I would never write faulty code. It is actually a simple-minded code. The way I have it written, it's going to actually do that it's going to run on every list in the document, and well, there are various other problems too, but we don't need into that. But you're really quick and dirty code in this case because you're after solving problems as quickly as you can. So these are the kind of situations where quick and dirty code, it can actually be acceptable as long as it still is correct. So building up pieces of script that you can use like this is something that if you do a lot of conversion is handy to keep this stuff around. And there are different ways that you can manage these little snippets of code that you're going to get. Macro files is one thing. As I've done it right now, I have these two macros in separate files, each of which is installed in XMetaL in the startup folder in a separate file. I could have combined those into a single file, and in fact, in practice, if you're doing deployment in your organization of macros, it's common to actually do that, deploy your macros in a single file, but you don't have to. You can do it. You can do it anyway. There's an even better way for some of these really, truly quick and dirty kind of things you're doing with script. Or it's better in the sense that it's easier to, that it's quicker and dirtier, I guess. And that is to know about the XMetaL paste script trick. You don't actually have to use a macro to run script in XMetaL. You can create a script using a magic header line that will tell XMetaL that this bit of content is a script, and then you can paste it, paste it into XMetaL, and XMetaL will run that script. So look at these two green lines of text. If I copy those two lines of text to my clipboard, then XMetaL will treat those two lines as code when I paste it into a document, and it will run those two lines of code. The first line of code is just a header line that tells XMetaL what kind of script it is. Actually, there's a typo in my slide, but I have it correct in my sample demo. I'll show you that when I get to it. There's only really one line of executable code here, which is the alert, so it's going to say hello. So let me go over and copy my code to the clipboard. I have that text editor. La-di-da. So here's my code, and I did not have that fixed in my code, so it's a good thing I could check that or notice that. So copy those two lines of text to my clipboard, and what I've done here in this sample bit here is I've shown you how you can put just a whole bunch of script bits in a single text file, save them as a text file on your hard drive, and then you can open that up whenever you need it to run these bits of script over and over again. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard, switch back to XMetaL, to do a paste. And you can do your paste anywhere. It just has to be in an open document in the regular editing window. So here's my paste. What the heck? That's unexpected. XMetaL script language. Oh, I'm missing the colon here. Good grief. Very important character here. These got to have colons on the end of them. Let's try this again. And paste, and it does the alert. And oh, are you guys seeing my switches back and forth? Okay, sorry, I was switching differently than I had been before, so that's good to know. Okay, you're watching me learn things about WebEx as we go. Back to my slides. So that's copying and pasting script. Now, once you're doing script macros, the sky's your limit. Anything that you can do in script, you can do with macros, and so you can weigh the cost of doing really, really fancy stuff with your quick and dirty code versus the amount of utility that you're going to get out of it. So you can do stuff as fancy as writing XSLT transformations if you're an XSLT whiz kid, and using that to process this content that you've just pasted in XMetaL, and you now need to manipulate in some way. So you can write XSLT transformations, use script in XMetaL to launch the XSLT, launch any XSLT processor that you want. MS-XML is handy, and it's right there defined in Windows for you already, but you can use any other XSLT processor that you want to install on your system. Write your script code that calls that processor to take a bit of content out of your document, maybe what you've copied, maybe what you've highlighted as a selection, or maybe some other rules. Run that through the XSLT transform, and then paste it back into your document. So anything that is eligible for you to do. It's just a question of how much time you think is worth spending on writing that code in order to gain the value of being able to do quick and dirty operations and massaging your content inside XMetaL. So I've been talking so fast that I think I'll just skip the recap. Recap is I covered a whole bunch of tips, and here they are accumulated on a slide, and you can review those when we send you. We will send out, by the way, not only the recording of the webinar, but if you're interested, I'll be also happy to. Well, actually, I'll put these slides up on SlideShare so that, and we'll send you a link to that, so you can get these slides afterwards as well. Just a couple links in here for some resources that will be useful if you are going to be doing any programming with XMetaL. There's the programmer side, which is the API reference, and we have it available on our website. And we also have a community forum, which is where you can correspond with us and with other users for tips and tricks about doing stuff with XMetaL. I know that some of you I've seen on the attendee list are already active users in the forum, and we appreciate that. So thanks for attending. So now comes the interesting part. I'm going to stop sharing now. The webinar is technically over, but if I have any questions in the Q&A box, I will see if we have any, and if we have any that I can actually address on the spot here, I will do this. Okay. So so the questions that I'm not able to answer on the fly, I will do my best to write up some answers afterwards and put them in the email that we send out as a follow-up. There's a question here: show how to add keys and tricks that would help during map construction out of DITA files imported from Word. So help for construct maps. That's a tricky one because Map construction involves adding links to files. So the mechanics of creating topic refs is something that you can do easily enough in XMetal, and it's easy enough to open a new DITA map file in the XML view of XMetal, and then you can do scripty kind of stuff on it once you're in the XML view. But script writing itself for maps is a little bit tricky because there's a little bit of hassle involved in getting the links correct. So it can be done, but that's going to be a little bit. There's going to be a little bit more scripting involved to sort of manage your own links. If you paste from Word, what happens with content in the paragraph marks? If you're pasting into DITA, the paragraph marks themselves. XMetal kind of munges the word content, so you don't ever see the problem with the paragraph marks themselves pasting away. You might see problems with pasting word into other document types, and the person who wrote the question mentioned that they often tell users to copy the text from Word into a text file first in order to prevent that additional kind of word gibberish from your XML. And that actually, although that didn't seem to be necessary in the cases that I was doing today in DITA, that actually is a pretty common thing that I do when I'm converting stuff, which is not specifically the case of copying from Word into the text editor, but but copying things from one application into another and then pasting it into XMetal after that seems to be a common thing that I do. In fact, you saw me do it today when I took some text that I had originally had in the web browser, and instead I opened it in Notepad++, and I got what for me was a better result when I pasted those contents into XMetal. Question, do these shortcut keys work in plain text mode? And the answer is unfortunately no. Most of the shortcut keys in XMetal do not work in plain text mode, largely because in plain text view in XMetal, most of the validation type stuff that XMetal does is turned off, and so the kinds of operations that XMetal needs to do, like joining and splitting elements, where it is only going to do those operations if the results are valid. Well, in plain text, XMetal can't tell if the results are going to be valid, and so we have to disable all those operations. Any tips for importing FrameMaker tables into XMetal? Unfortunately, I personally don't have any because I have not done that. I've never been a Frame user, so to say that I don't have any tips that I can give you. Maybe I'll hope that if any of you happen to have done that, maybe if you could drop me a line or maybe post a note on the forum about that, that would allow me to give some information to the folks who are sharing your suffering in migrating from Frame into XMetal. So questions that I have on the list, and so I guess we will. Oh no, I did see one more question here. Sorry. Suggestions for how to get. Okay, that's a little bit off topic, but for suggestions for how I can get management to upgrade from XMetal 6 to XMetal 8, tell them that XMetal 8 is awesome. I was using XMetal 8 here in my presentation today, and honestly, don't you want to install XMetal 8 just for the slide-in windows for the element list and the attribute inspector? I think that alone should be a selling point. But seriously, if you have a content management system, you may be bound to a particular version of XMetal because of that, so you'll need to check on that. But otherwise, yeah, if you seriously want help with picking XMetal 8, give us a call, and we'll be glad to give you some advice on that. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to call it to a close. Thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you the next time. Bye bye.